We're going to go ahead and jump into Module 4, Implementation and Monitoring of the Comprehensive School Improvement Plan. And so we're going to consider these questions today. And this training is for all schools and all instructional leaders to enhance their strategies for monitoring their comprehensive school improvement plan. This does not replace or take away from the virtual visits and monitoring visits that the Office of School Quality will be conducting with some schools during the fall and the spring. But this is for everyone to really develop and hone those skills at improving the way that all of you can look at, monitor your comprehensive school improvement plan, and then improve upon it. And this is all designed to do that. So today we're going to look at what are the key components of the comprehensive school improvement plan. You have to have a plan in place if you want to make things better and improve. Why monitor for implementation? Why do these things? How do we know we are doing what we said we're going to do in our plan? And how can we prove it? How can we show that? And then how do we monitor for impact or effectiveness? How do we know the plan that we've set up is doing the things we want it to do? How do we monitor our resources? Are our resources being used in a way that is in line with our comprehensive school improvement plan? Then, most importantly, I would say, how to reflect, revise, and reassess our comprehensive school improvement plan. We always want to be looking at, taking that step back, trying to figure out how we can improve on that improvement plan. Said improve twice in that sentence, that's okay. And we also want to be able to celebrate our successes, to look at the things that our school is doing well. Can we extend those into other areas, maybe where we're not doing so well? Or throughout our division, what can we learn from other schools and other areas of success? And then lastly, what additional resources will be available? And we'll provide some resources at the conclusion of this presentation. We'll be emailing them out to your division contact, a lot of resources, and we'll get to that later. And yes, we will be providing this slideshow. So to answer that question right away.
Oh.
All right, I like that. All right, so this is Module 4, Implementing and Monitoring the Comprehensive School Improvement Plan. This is the fourth in a series. And many of you that I see a lot of familiar names and faces with us, which is wonderful. A lot of new people with us as well. But many of you participated in some of these earlier modules. Module 1, Understanding the Continuous Improvement Process, the overview of the whole process of how to make schools better. Module 2, Conducting that comprehensive needs assessment. How do we get at the issues that we want to improve upon? What are the real issues? How do we discern where we are? And then Module 3, Building that comprehensive school improvement plan. And then today, what you're here for is the implementing and monitoring of the comprehensive school improvement plan. And we at the Office of School Quality, and this is a little plug for us, we do offer training, technical assistance sessions on all of these modules. And certainly we would be happy to do that and work with your school division contact if you'd like to have more resources or training in any of those areas, if it's an area you're kind of struggling with. And as you go through the year, be thinking of that. Because as we think about implementing and monitoring of the plan, that comprehensive school improvement plan, it's not to be done at the end of the year. It's something that's to be done often, looking at, reflecting, and revising, reviewing as we go along. It's that living, breathing document that we often talk about. And so, a lot of times we'll have school leaders that get to a point where like, we thought we were solving the right problem, but now we've reflected and we realized, well, it's a whole different type of situation we need to get at, and we really want to get some assistance. Well, that's what the Office of School Quality is here for, to assist you, to help you to reach those high student achievement outcomes that you're striving for. So state and federal requirements. Schools must annually monitor the implementation of a multi-year improvement plan and use the results to update the school improvement plan. Now, many of you are from schools that have many challenges. Many of you are from schools that have fewer challenges, but everyone here is from a school that is doing something right. But every school across the Commonwealth must have a comprehensive school improvement plan, and you have to look at it, revise it, and change it. And if you don't, the question is why even have a plan? Also, implementation of those evidence-based interventions, those EBIs, must be evaluated annually to comply with ESSA requirements. Plan must have a mechanism for progress monitoring. It uses a systematic process for gathering, analyzing, sharing, and using information. And we always want to be thinking about processes and thinking about how we can set things up, because as we all know, school administration changes, leadership change. And so if you think about this, if you were to leave your school or you were to leave your division, could someone else come in and pick up the plan that you've left behind and know what's happening? Could someone pick that up and understand the data behind implementation, the data behind impact, and understand where things are headed and how to evaluate that? And really, so it should not be about one single individual, but it should be about a process or a plan that's in place. The best practices and process described in this presentation are not mandated by the Department of Education, but are designed to ensure compliance with state and federal regulations, as noted in the code section. And this module seeks to enhance and elevate the quality and effectiveness of monitoring at both the school and division level, developing your strategies and your practices to be able to monitor things on your own. And we follow this VA CSIP model. It's that plan, do, study, act model. And it's our continuous improvement cycle. And so when we look at the continuous improvement cycle, it all begins with that comprehensive needs assessment. To improve in any meaningful way, we have to figure out, where are we? What is our status right now? And truly assess that and draw together as much data as possible. And sometimes we feel like we're drowning in data, but really having a process to look at the data, to organize it, to understand what are our root causes. Once we know what the root cause is, once we know why we are having the issue or challenges we are, then we can answer our foundational questions. What are we trying to accomplish? How we know that a change is an improvement, and what changes can result in an improvement. And so once we develop our needs assessment, we identify our needs, our priorities, our essential actions. How do we get at that root cause? And I've mentioned that term root cause a number of times. It's because oftentimes we jump to one set of test scores, or we jump to one set of discipline information, or one set of attendance information, and then we try to solve that without digging deeper. And so we really need to do that and get at that root cause. And it really is that comprehensive needs assessment process. Then once we have our root cause, we plan, we implement our plan, we study it, try to gauge the success, and we act on it. But notice in the center of our circle, monitoring of the comprehensive school improvement plan is key. That is the center, and it's always about monitoring. And monitoring is not just, okay, what does a test score tell us at the end of the year? Or what are our benchmark assessments tell us? That's helpful data, but that is just one piece of that impact data. We also have to look at, how do we know we're implementing? How do we know we're doing what we said in our plan? And so that monitoring piece is huge in a number of ways. And we're going to talk more about all of that monitoring for implementation and monitoring for impact. And are we achieving the SMART goals that we've set out for us based on our priorities? And lastly, not lastly, but reflecting and reassessing needs, our strategies that reflect and reassess is a key process in our model to really go back to not only the CNA, but also to go back to our improvement plan and see how we need to change or revise. And remember, that doesn't just have to happen before the school year starts, or it doesn't have to happen at the end of the school year. That can be done as the year goes along, really kind of looking at what's working, what's not working. How do we know if we're doing what we said we're going to be doing, and are we meeting with success? So our goals for Module 4 today: develop a monitoring process to ensure the implementation and impact of the CSIP. Remember, are we doing what we said we're doing? And is what we're doing having an effect on student outcomes? And remember, going back to something I said, but it's important to repeat, that process is huge. If you leave your school today, can someone pick up the plan and pick up the monitoring plan and know exactly what's happening and what's going on? That's really crucial. So you also want to establish processes and checkpoints to collect and review data while essential actions are in progress. You want to be able to adjust mid-year. You want to be able to, revise and update things. This doesn't mean, halfway through the year to completely throw out your school improvement plan. No, it means to be looking at the data, looking at how things are being implemented, and then really determine, do you need new strategies? Do you need to refine things? Do you need to maybe make some changes? Or are things going really well and you're really pleased with that and you're seeing success? Resources will be provided today. Like I said, emailed out after the presentation, the Module 4 slideshow that we're going over today, the checklist, a good way to see and review your monitoring processes, an evaluation rubric of your comprehensive school improvement plan, and also a problem-solving strategy to determine root causes known as the 5 whys, which some of you have seen before, but it's important. We'll talk about that and how that ties into that reflect piece at the end of this presentation. You also want to be able to map out junctures and decision points at which to reflect on progress, course correct, or revise your plan as needed to improve student outcomes. And you notice at the bottom of the screen, there's a reflection question. Why is accountability important to the school improvement plan process? Why is accountability important to that CSIP process? What I want you to do now, so this is sort of an interactive part right now. So what I want you to do, look at that question and go ahead and respond to it in the chat. So if you could, go ahead. Why is accountability important to that CSIP process? And just go ahead and take a second. If you're brave enough, go ahead and share that in the chat. Just go ahead and type something in there. Why is that accountability piece so important? It'll take a minute for you to do that. Go ahead and share that in that chat in the reflection piece. Why is accountability important to the CSIP process? The chair said ensuring forward progress. Very good. Following through on that plan for progress. Very good. Adjustments to be made. Helps the adults in the building understand what success will look like. Thank you, Lynn. That's excellent insight. Of sharing that fidelity of implementation, right? And that's huge, right? So are we doing what we said? Or are we just saying we're doing it? That is crucial. Have that planning fully implemented and measuring its effectiveness. Thank you, Jocelyn. So those are great responses to this, and keep them coming in. That feedback process, and we all know how important feedback is to students in a classroom. It's one of those really high up there strategies for students to improve upon. This is the same thing for teachers and schools, feedback and developing and improving a plan. So really very important. Ownership, that's terrific, right? How do we have everyone own that plan and be a part of it? Excellent. Thank you all for being brave enough to share in the chat with that. So I know sometimes it's hard to do that, but we do appreciate you doing that. Also very important, another critical piece to the monitoring process is stakeholder engagement. And so when we focus on stakeholder engagement, we often think about developing the plan, and we think about our comprehensive needs assessment and kind of bringing in various stakeholders for that. But sometimes it gets lost in the monitoring piece of engaging stakeholders. And your stakeholders are going to know if something's working or not. And so that's really important to get their feedback. Because sometimes as the instructional leader, we have a view that's not necessarily accurate, and it's very different than what the teachers, the students, parents, and other professionals in the building might have of the plan. And so really it's important to have a process to engage stakeholders, to really get their feedback, and to really get that complete picture of how the plan is going. So have a way to engage and gather stakeholder feedback at every phase, plan for identifying stakeholders and membership, opportunities for stakeholders to provide that formative feedback. Remember, it's how we can improve that plan. It's not summative, right? It shouldn't be just, oh, it worked, this person said it worked, this person said it didn't work. That's not what we're looking at. We want to really get that feedback from our stakeholders to make a better plan. And so just something, I'm not going to have you answer this in the chat, but there's a reflection question here. What has been your experience with engaging stakeholders in progress or plan monitoring? Just be thinking about that. And it's important to think about that because sometimes we have had some negative experiences with stakeholders and we want to shy away from that. But sometimes our harshest critics can be the ones that can help us the most in really developing and refining our plan and helping us to improve. So that's just something to reflect on, your experience with engaging stakeholders, and be thinking about how to do that. And sometimes we don't even think about, engaging stakeholders in the monitoring part. We just think about, what's the, our monitoring is the end of the year and we look at some test scores and we move on. That's not going to get you where you want to go. That's not very successful. Remember, you want to be monitoring all along the way, monitoring for implementation of your plan. Are you doing what you said you would do? You want to be monitoring that data for impact, triangulating multiple pieces of data, different types of data. Then you want to be able to reflect and revise, but you also want to engage those stakeholders in the process and have them use that feedback to improve where you are. So just something to think about. You don't have to share that in the chat. Just kind of that's just a reflection for you today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Rebecca Hall.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to dig a little deeper into the phases for Module 4 for implementing and monitoring. And if you've been to our other module sessions for CNA and CSIP, you've seen phases there too. So kind of mirroring that process. So of course, phase 1 is going to be implementation of your CSIP. Phase 2, we're going to talk further about monitoring for implementation, monitoring for impact in phase 3, and monitoring your resources in phase 4. Right? And then all of those things lead to that reflect, reassess, and revise. And like Mike said, this is not, I'm going to implement in September and reflect, reassess, and revise in June, right? This is an ongoing process cycle that you're working throughout the whole year. You're constantly monitoring and reevaluating and adjusting that CSIP as needed. You'll also see there from phase 5, we kind of had a turn off to a little sidebar there to the comprehensive needs assessment. Right. So as you're reflecting, it might be appropriate to go back to that CNA and see what did the data tell us? Are we really addressing those root causes that we identified in that CNA process? So that's a little component that we wanted to include to highlight when you are reflecting and reassessing, you're using your current data, but also going to that CNA, revisit the CNA. Maybe you need to update that. And then you'll have a fresh set of data as you go back and implement and make adjustments. So just keeping all of those components in mind, that CNA is not a one and done, just like the CSIP is not a one and done, right? Constantly reviewing and reevaluating based on the current needs and data that we have. All right, so we're going to go to each phase. So the first phase, can you click, Mike? Okay, thank you. The first phase is implementation. Right? So you've written this great plan, you attended the module 3 training, you've got your team together, you have your plan ready to go. Now you're going to implement it. Right? And for some of you, you've already been implementing potentially because some of you have been in school for several weeks. So you're implementing your plan. Right? And so some highlights there, right? Of course, it's that sustainable living document, guiding the work of your school, right? Making adjustments as needed. Right? Another component of that implementation is all staff are engaged in the collaborative analysis of individual student data and identification of student needs. So everybody's involved. Everybody knows their role. Everybody knows the goals that you're working on and why you're doing these pieces and why you're implementing the steps that you've chosen. In your implementation, right, that's the plan. It's the clear plan for how you're going to measure and monitor that fidelity. So we saw that in the chat, right? So you've written this plan and we want to make sure as we're implementing it, we're doing it with fidelity so we can determine, are we making progress towards our SMART goals, right? So that's that implementation piece, making sure you've got all those components there. Okay, and we're going to do a quick review of Module 3. I know some of you attended the CSIP training last month, but a quick little refresher there of what is in your CSIP. making sure you have all these components. So that way, as you're implementing them, everything is there and aligned and you're moving forward. So of course you have your SMART goals, right, that you've identified based on CNA data, based on where your school is heading and what areas you need to make progress. Then you have your essential actions, right? That's kind of they're aligned to the needs. And then you've got all your action steps, right? So the pieces, the what are you going to do? Part of your CSIP, of course, is including what professional development is needed. And if you want to reach this SMART goal and implement this particular strategy, what PD is needed to help move you in that direction? Also, what resources and supports are needed? Okay? What might you need to purchase? Who might you need to invite in as an additional support to help move your school in the direction you're headed? In your CSIP, you also have those detailed timelines, right? And not just September to June, but when are you stopping and checking? What action steps are being implemented first? What action steps are being implemented second? When are you having those checkpoints, right? To see, are we making progress? Have we implemented these? So those detailed dates, not just the whole year. And then assignments of responsibility, right? So everyone on staff knows their role, but it's written in that plan. Who's doing what, when, and then who's monitoring what, when. So keeping sure that all those stakeholders are involved in the plan, and that really helps with that accountability piece too, of knowing who's responsible where. And that also helps, Micah mentioned this at the beginning, if someone else were to come in, right? If someone were to leave your school and get a promotion or something, then someone else were to come in and they were to look at this plan, they would know who's doing what are they doing it? So we have our timelines. And what are we doing? We have our action steps. So making sure those components are really clear in your CSIP to begin, and then of course adjusting throughout the year. The next slide, this is just our sample CSIP template. We're not required to use this template. We were just going to go through and show you the components here, right? So you've got that area of focus. So that's your CNA data. What is your priority for the year? You've got your SMART goal. Right? What is it you're trying to achieve? What's the outcome you're trying to reach? You've got your essential action. That's the how. What strategies are you implementing? What EDI are you using to reach that SMART goal? And then those action steps, right? And those, the more detailed, the better, because then it's really clear to see, have we done this action step? Did it work? Was there an impact from it? Have we done the next action step? Did it work? Was there an impact from it? So the more detail you can provide there, easier it is to kind of monitor for implementation and for impact. So as you're thinking about implementing your CSIP, and again, some of you have already begun implementing. So these are just some questions to constantly be considering, right? Does your CSIP have the essential component? Is there anything you need to go back and adjust? What information from the CNA led you to the SMART goals you have? What essential actions and action steps that do you have, and are they aligned back to that SMART goal? Keeping your eye on the goal, what steps are you implementing to reach that goal? Do you have a plan to monitor implementation? So when you look at your CSIP and you look at those timelines, do you have a plan where we're going to pull the data every other week, every other month? We're going to meet at this time to review. Is there a plan in there for monitoring that implementation? Do the responsible parties know, right? Does the person responsible know what they're doing and when? Have you identified the artifacts that you're going to use? And when is the CSIP team meeting, right? We've said already, it's not a one and done. So you have the plan. Now, when are you scheduling those regular meetings to pull the team back together to say, where are we? What are our next steps? What has been working? So you can continue to reevaluate. So keep those questions in mind as you're working through that implementation. And then one other just highlight from module 3 here is the CSIP evaluation rubric. And this was, we shared this with the module 3 training back in August, and we'll share it again today. Just as another check step for you. This is just for your use as kind of a self-assessment to see, do we have all these components? Maybe you feel as you get in and you start working that plan, some things are missing, right? Aren't going well. You go back to this rubric and say, are we missing something? What didn't we include in our plan that might be helpful to add to provide that additional detail needed to make sure we're making progress. So we'll share that resource with you also. All right, so phase 2. Right, so you started implementing, you feel like things are going well, everybody's on board and knows what they're doing. Now we want to check, right? We want to monitor for implementation. This part is kind of making sure you're doing what the plan says, right? You didn't just write this plan and leave it, but you're working the plan, right? So why would we monitor implementation? Of course, we want to ensure action steps are being completed with fidelity. We want to ensure that we're following that timeline, right, with our goal at the end being student achievement. We want to make sure that we're reviewing those artifacts frequently, okay? And we want to make sure that we're communicating to our stakeholders. So by monitoring for implementation, you're kind of continually bringing these things to the forefront of your mind. Those action steps, that timeline, that communication, those artifacts, keeping those things moving forward. So as you're thinking about monitoring for implementation, right, just some more reflection questions, and you can always pull these slides as we share them. These might help guide some of your CSIP meetings, right? Some questions you can ask in the meeting. What action steps have we done on time, right? We said we wanted to get this started in September. We said we wanted to hold this PD during teacher work week. Did we do that? Okay, we completed that action step, right? What action steps might need to be added? Right? Maybe you did a PD, you did that action step during teacher work week, and now you're several weeks into the school year, now maybe it's October, and you're like, oh, we need to go back and revisit and make sure that that action step, that PD is being implemented. We're not seeing it in our walkthroughs, so now we need to add another action step for a review and take some time to revisit what strategies were shared in that PD. Okay, what action steps have not yet been implemented? Right? Certainly there's going to be some things that are in that chronological order that are going to come later than others. So just making sure that those are still in your mind, they're still out there. Which team members have been participating in monitoring implementation? And maybe some team members might need some support, right? You might have some instructional leaders in your building that are helping implement, maybe some department chairs or team leads, and they might need some help just making sure that those things, that monitoring is happening, if that was a responsibility for them, or that those action steps have been implemented. And do you have the necessary supports? So as you start working the plan, you might realize, oh, we need that support. We need this extra training. We need these extra resources. We need to adjust our schedule. We need this extra time. What supports might be needed as you start implementing and realizing you're working it and realizing what you maybe missed when you created the plan at the beginning. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the evidence, right? So you're monitoring your implementation. You're asking yourself those questions. You're bringing those questions to the team. Okay, but now you want to have evidence that you're doing those things. Okay, those of you that have participated last year in monitoring with our office, these were some of the things we brought up in those monitoring visits, right? But it shouldn't just be for that. Everybody should be monitoring for implementation throughout the whole year, not just when you have a monitoring meeting, right? It should be constantly monitoring for implementation. But here's where we're going to talk about what artifacts you could use. Okay, so here's a sample. So just pretend like this is your situation, right? So by June, we want to increase the pass rate from wherever you are to wherever you want to go of students passing the reading standards of learning assessment. So that's your goal. So in order to reach that goal, your team has developed this essential action. Develop, implement, and monitor a process for systematic and aligned instruction in reading for all students. So that's the how we're going to get there. We're going to have systematic and aligned instruction that'll help us achieve our SMART goal. Then we develop some sample action steps. We just listed a few here, right? We didn't list everything. So one potential action step would be to lead reading intervention sessions with identified students using a particular reading. Okay, so just look at that first action step for me. And I want you to think for a minute. If you were going to lead reading intervention sessions with identified students using a reading program, what artifacts could you collect to show that you are leading the reading intervention sessions? So if you can think about that and put into chat, what artifacts could you collect that would show you are implementing this action step, you are holding these reading intervention sessions? What artifacts could you pull to demonstrate that? Lesson plans, schedules, perfect. Reading logs, the reading schedule, okay? So those are the types of things. List of students, yes. So which students are participating? When are they participating? What are they doing in that intervention time? What's the lesson plan say? Okay? Those would all be evidence of implementation. Okay? We're going to save those data questions for impact in a minute. Okay, so the implementation, definitely the students, the schedules, maybe it's an online program, right? Definitely over the past year, we've shifted to a lot of virtual programs. So that could even be usage data, right? So maybe your intervention program is also using some online platform usage data to show, yes, we're implementing. Okay. If your action step was conduct weekly walkthrough observations, so if that's what you said you were going to do, then we're going to provide feedback to our teachers on the delivery of aligned instruction. So we said we're going to do those walkthroughs. And we're going to provide that feedback. What artifacts could we pull to show, yes, we are doing the walkthroughs and we're providing the feedback? What evidence could you have there for number 2? We can put some in the chat. Walkthrough schedules, sure, right? Those schedules. So you have your admin schedule of who's going into what grade level when and what that's going to look like. Your walkthrough document, yes, right? This is the document we're going to use when we go on the walkthrough. We can see there that the things that we're looking for are all based on alignment. The feedback forms, perfect. Hard copies that you completed the walkthrough. Here was the feedback that we gave to teachers. Absolutely. So those are things to show we're doing this step. We're doing what we said we were going to do. Okay, then the third sample here is participate in the professional learning community meetings, right, to discuss student performance data. So what would you pull to show we are participating in those meetings? We are holding those meetings. What data would you pull to show that? What artifacts could you have? Agendas, sure. Sign-in sheets, who was in attendance at those meetings, right? The minutes from those meetings to highlight that we've talked about student data. Absolutely. Okay. So those are just some examples, and that's just, again, examples, but we really want you to think about how you would show implementation. So if the goal of monitoring for implementation is to show we're doing what we said, what evidence would you have to say, yep, we've done this? Right, those schedules, agendas, the minutes, the walkthroughs, the lessons. What evidence would you have to show that we're doing these things? Right? Okay, here's some questions to think about as you're thinking about that monitoring for implementation. What artifacts do you have to demonstrate that you've completed the action steps? Okay, what artifacts haven't been collected yet? Right, sometimes as you start implementing, you're like, oh, we should also pull that in, and we just haven't gotten to it yet. What additional artifacts might you need to show, right? Are agendas enough, or do we want to have the minutes and the results of those PLC meetings to show, yes, we had these conversations about data? So that might be the additional artifact, not just who attended, but what were the results from that meeting? What were the action steps that teachers were going to go back and try and do based on their discussion about the data? And then what artifacts will you continue to collect throughout the year, right? So this is not just collect your artifacts one time, but you're going to continually collect those artifacts, right, to show that you've implemented those action steps with fidelity, right? And once you see, and you'll see hopefully over time, right, if you're looking at those walkthroughs, right, over time, since you're providing feedback to teachers, we should see adjustments in that walkthrough data, right, and improvements in what we're seeing in the classroom, because we're collecting that data regularly to say, yeah, we're doing the walkthroughs and we're starting to see those improvements. And then one thing here we threw in is just the checklist. So anyone who has been to any of our sessions for the modules, you know we have created checklists for each module. So this is just another resource that we'll share with you. So as you go back and you're working with your team on monitoring for implementation, right, that second phase, you could use this checklist to kind of guide those conversations, review, make sure, are we doing everything we wanted to do? Do we have everything covered? Just a resource for you, another way to kind of keep yourself on track. That checklist format's really nice to be like, yep, we're good, we're good, we're good. Ooh, this is where we need to focus our energy. All right, so you've monitored for implementation. You're doing what you said you were going to do. You're like, yes, we're doing all this stuff, right? We've got all these new pieces in place. Everybody's on board, watching all these teachers work so hard to implement all these strategies. Are we having an impact? Right, so that's where monitor for impact comes in. And the monitoring for impact, right? Why we would do this is really to ensure that we're making that progress towards our SMART goals. Right? We don't expect you're not going to reach the SMART goal tomorrow, but you're making progress. Right? You're making adjustments to the plan based on your data prior to the end of the school year. So as you're monitoring for impact, you're seeing, this isn't working the way we thought. You might need to make some adjustments. Okay? That you're using the resources you have effectively and with fidelity. Maybe you need to pull in more resources as you see the impact there. And you're looking at various types of data. So we had student data come up before too in the chat. Like you're looking at all those different types of data to kind of see, we're analyzing frequently what's working, what's not, where are we seeing that progress being made. So we know that those action steps and those strategies are impactful towards progress. All right, so we're gonna do the same kind of activity here, right? Same SMART goal, same scenarios. You're increasing your reading performance on that standards of learning assessment, that pass rate. We're implementing systematic and aligned instruction. Now, okay, we're looking for the impact, the progress. So when we're looking at that, leading the reading intervention sessions with identified students, think back to implementation. Right, we said we would have schedules, we would have a list of students, we would look at those lesson plans, usage data. Now, if I want to know, is it working? What data should I look at? What artifacts should you collect to show these reading intervention sessions are working? So if you could put into chat some ideas there. What would you collect to show that that reading intervention program is working? The data from the assessment. Sure, maybe you did a pre-post assessment scores. You did a pre before they started this series of intervention sessions, and a couple weeks in, you do a post. Perfect. Progress monitoring data, intervention tracking documents, growth. I see student growth data, right? So you're not going to wait right till the end of the year. Certainly, you're going to monitor regularly. So you're gonna, maybe you run a 4-week series and you say, okay, here's the pre-test, here's the post-test, and now let's see what progress we've made for these students, for this particular group of students. Right? And it's also really good when you start to look at that impact data where you can look at different groups of students. Maybe the intervention series sessions that you have for 3rd grade is working really well and you're seeing those changes. Maybe for 4th grade, it's not. So then you start to have those questions about, how is 3rd grade implementing differently than 4th grade? What's different there that we could replicate what's happening in 3rd into 4th? So that impact data, the data on the students. All right, so what about if you were doing the walkthrough observations? Okay, so what data could you collect? What artifacts could you show after you've done those walkthroughs to show that it's having an impact? Right, so we've had the observations, we have the feedback, so we know we're doing it, we have the schedule. But how do we know that that action step's making a difference, helping us progress towards our SMART? It's a little bit harder. What can we collect there? Any ideas? Now, the level of student engagement, specific reading strategies observed? Sure, absolutely. So as you're doing more and more walkthroughs, over time, are we seeing improvement in that alignment? Are we seeing improvement maybe in that student engagement? Someone commented the formative assessments. Yes. So when you see those formative assessments, are they aligned? Because we said we had systematic and aligned instruction. So are they aligned? And then over time, are we seeing those students improve on those formative assessments, on those exit tickets? It could even be the conversations you have with students, right? When you're doing those walkthroughs, did you stop and ask the students some questions about what's going on in the classroom? And then over time, you see their answers to those questions improve, right? Maybe they have a better understanding of what's going on. Maybe they're able to say, with more, we're working on this and those types of answers, student data, right? Level of rigor, the questioning strategies, absolutely. So if we want it to be aligned, are we seeing that cognitive level, right? Cognition and cognitive level, are we seeing that improve over time as we're conducting those walkthroughs? So it's not enough to just collect the data, right? You collected the data to show you're doing it. But what does the data show you? Are you tracking over time changes in instruction that in turn could result in changes in that student performance? All right, and then number 3, participate in the professional learning community meetings to discuss student performance data. So what will we collect there? What artifacts can we collect to show that action step, having those meetings, is impacting student performance? So increase in reading levels, like that too. And the text students are reading. Evidence of growth, right? If you're looking at that data, are you seeing growth just in the student data? Right? In those PLC meetings, what could you look for? Reflection questions, yes. Are those conversations getting deeper into what's working and what's not in those PLC meetings? That comparative data from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And by data and assessment data, we're talking formative assessments, maybe some summative benchmarking assessments. It could be data from like just student work, right? Our teachers bringing in samples of student work to show comparisons and looking at some exemplars, common assessments, most commonly missed questions. So as you're looking at that data, right, are we then in turn seeing, okay, we had this conversation, right, on this week about these most missed questions and these errors students were making. So now in 2 weeks, let's revisit and let's look at the data in 2 weeks. And are we seeing changes in student performance, right? Are we seeing that students were having trouble with these concepts and now they've mastered those concepts? So continually looking at where the students have adjusted as teachers have had those conversations and adjusted instruction. Okay? So all those pieces and really looking at all the data, right? Don't rely on that one piece of data, but really all the work that's happening, all those good things going on in classrooms. Let's analyze that to see what's working to continue to move students forward. Okay. So great answers there. And I'm hoping that this activity kind of helps a little bit with the difference between like we're doing it, that's implementation, but now how do we know it's working, right? What's the impact towards our SMART goal? So that's really the difference there. We wanted to give you some concrete examples. So I really appreciate you participating and answering. I know in chat with 100 and some people, it's hard sometimes to put it out there. So I definitely appreciate that. So again, here are some reflection questions, right? These are the questions you want to bring back, use with your team. Does your data show progress, right? Again, incremental changes, right? You're not going to reach your SMART goal tomorrow, but are you moving in the right direction? What additional data sources do you need? Okay. What student groups are making progress? I alluded to that before. Maybe you have a group of students that you're really seeing progress with them. So what's different about their implementation of the action steps there? What's different there that you need to mirror in some other groups? Or what maybe PD, like certain teachers maybe are doing a great job. What PD could they provide or suggestions could they offer? Or what additional training might another group of teachers need to help those students make progress? And then what adjustments need to be made, right? We're always going back to that CSIP. So we're saying, okay, we're monitoring for impact. These things are working really well. So we're going to keep doing those. These we need to adjust here. We need to add in an extra PD. We need to add in these extra resources. And we need to change the schedule a little bit. What adjustments do we need to make to try and make more progress? What information should be shared, right? And then those successes, right? We know good things are happening. So we didn't reach the SMART goal, but we made progress. So how can you celebrate those successes? How can you celebrate those teachers for digging in and trying and working hard on this and the progress that students are making? How can you celebrate your students' progress over time, that growth that they're showing, that they're learning and growing each day? So really taking time to pause and not just focus on the SMART goal, but where are we moving? If we're moving, right? So celebrating, taking time to pause and celebrate all those successes along the way. All right, so the last two things here, just about implementation impact, just because we've got a lot of questions about this in the past. We're really hoping that today will clarify for you the differences, right? So that implementation, thinking about phase 2, when you're monitoring for implementation, that's the process of putting the plan into effect. That's the execution of the plan. So you're executing the plan. You're doing what is outlined. That's the input, the processes, the things you're doing. Okay? And then the impact is having the effect on someone or something. It's the impact is that evidence that shows you're making progress towards your SMART goal. So that's the outcome, right? So implementation is like what you put in, the work you're doing. Impact is what you're getting out, the results you're seeing of that hard work that's moving us closer to our SMART goal. Okay, we've got over some examples of the different artifacts for those. So hopefully that helps a little bit to frame it in your mind and clarify those two. It gets a little fuzzy between implementation and impact. So we want to make sure we've clarified that. Then we have one more quick example, and we'll just walk through this one. This one's done for you, but just a different instead of using SOL data. So if your SMART goal was to reduce chronic absenteeism, right? Essential action, develop, implement, and monitor a plan to address chronic absenteeism for students who have been identified as chronically absent in previous years. So that's my SMART goal. That's my essential action. Here are some potential action steps, right? Weekly task force meetings, holding family meetings once a student's reached 5 absences, school counselor check-ins with a certain pocket of identified students, bi-weekly mentor program for maybe a different pocket of identified students. These are different action steps you could put into place, right? And then I want to monitor for implementation. So for my agendas, the weekly meetings, I've got agendas, attendance records, right? For my family check-ins, once the students reach 5 absences, I've got the calendar with a log. Those meetings occurred on these dates. The weekly counselor check-ins, we've got a log, we've got attendance. You can see the types of things there for evidence of implementation. Did it happen? Yes, because I've got attendance, I've got agendas, I've got a log, I've got the calendar. Like I know it happened. So it was implemented. That's my evidence that it implemented those things. Now for my impact, I've got to go back to my SMART goal. What's my weekly data report saying, right? Am I seeing improvements? Am I seeing certain students improve their weekly attendance rate, right? Am I looking at that constantly? And that can help you when you look, maybe certain students were in the school counselor check-ins. So you could say, okay, that really worked. With that data from that group of students, we saw an improvement in attendance. But maybe the bi-weekly mentoring programs, that group of students, we didn't see the same improvement in attendance. So what do we need to adjust and reflect? So really that evidence of impact is going to drive back to my SMART goal, right? So I'm looking at that weekly data report. I'm seeing, am I seeing a reduction in my chronic absenteeism rate, right? Am I constantly got my eye on that target of that SMART goal with my impact? That's just one example, just trying to clarify for you and kind of keep giving some examples of what this might look like. You, of course, are going to take this and adjust it to what works for your SMART goal, for your action steps, for your scenario and your setting. This is by no means the answer. It's just one example to help you kind of think through the process. And hopefully when you go back and meet with your team, you've got some key questions and key things that you can help to kind of drive those conversations. All right, so I'm gonna turn it back over to Mike. So we've talked about we're implementing, we monitored for implementation, monitored for impact. Mike's gonna round us out, finish up here with the last couple phases, and then wrap up the session. So
thank you, Rebecca. And now we pick up with phase 4, monitoring of resources. And this ensures effective professional development is provided to staff to carry out action steps. There are many great plans and great interventions, but oftentimes we see that the training, the teaching of staff and the leader of the building is often lagging behind. And so many times, many great plans kind of fall apart without that effective professional development. We also monitor our resources to ensure that budgetary decisions are connected to the priorities in our plan and that resources are aligned to our action steps. And the resources are being leveraged for long-term sustainability. We want to always think about we're aiming for a multi-year improvement plan. We don't just want something one and done. We want to really set ourselves up for success, for student outcomes and achievement well beyond just this one school year. So reflection questions to consider when we think about professional development. What professional development is needed to support the CSIP priorities? And every school is different and every school has a unique situation. And you want to reflect on that what does your staff need to make this happen? And you can't just assume that everyone knows the plan and that everyone knows how to do the things you've outlined in the plan. And it's also very key that the principal, the instructional leader, division leadership are very knowledgeable about the plan and what's going to happen and can educate others on the different pieces and processes within the plan. How will you monitor the implementation of instructional practices learned during professional development? Is it being done with fidelity? Or did you just have a session on professional development and no one's really carrying it out? What follow-up training will be needed? How will you monitor the impact of the professional development on progress towards the SMART goals? And what adjustments need to be made to the CSIP to account for additional professional development needs? And we always want to be thinking about what do our teachers need? What does our staff need? How do we want to make sure everyone understands what we're trying to do?
Mike, can I interrupt real quick? I don't think you
Please.
put the slide for us. I think we're seeing the wrong slide.
We're seeing the wrong slide?
Yeah, we're
I'm
on page.
sorry.
I think so, because you were going over the. Sorry.
Oops. Can you see it now?
No, it did not click forward.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Uh-oh.
Pause for one moment.
Sorry
Let me
about that.
take over. Maybe I'll take over presenting. I'm not sure what happened. Something.
Yeah, something got messed up. I apologize. Let me go ahead and see if I can. I apologize for that.
Sorry, we'll get you straight. Okay, let's see. I think I'm sharing. Let me share my
Can
screen.
you take over?
All right, can we see the reflection questions now? Yes, thank you, Karen. I saw your thumbs up. I'm going with Karen. She said yes. All right, we're moving on.
Okay,
you.
and my screen is struggling. So as long as everyone can see it, I'm just going to go ahead and keep on going. I apologize for
No
that
worries.
issue, and thank you for participants, and thank you, Rebecca, for jumping in. So when we think about our reflection questions to consider for funding, we want to consider how school improvement grant funds are aligned to the critical evidence-based interventions in our CSIP. Who we want to think about, particularly for federally identified schools, are your grant fundings aligned to your priorities? How does funding adequately compensate staff for time commitment and task completion? And it's really very important that we align our resources with our needs and our priorities. Do we have a budget timeline? How do we engage stakeholders in the decision-making process for resource allocation? Once again, go back to stakeholders. How are we making that work? So that's important to consider for resources. Moving on to phase 5. When we talk about phase 5, this is the huge piece here of the reflection, reassess, and revise. Really, what is working, what is not working, and what is needed to improve. And so when we think about, this is the sort of the step back. This is the take it all in. This is the how do we know what we need to change, what we know we're doing right, what do we need to go back and revise, how does this affect our plan? And this is a big component of monitoring, because if you don't do this and you've got all that data, then you're not really monitoring, because monitoring should include the change piece. How do we make our plan better and better? So when we consider what is needed to improve, we want to consider student academic performance, progress towards our SMART goals, impact of instructional strategies, plan for sustaining implementation, evidence to support modifications of the plan, and data to inform instructional decisions. And the reflection and discussion, hopefully you can see, I can't see it anymore, but hopefully you can see it on your screen. How will you know if your monitoring plan and implementation is successful, and how will you determine if you need to make revisions? You don't have to answer that now, but that's a huge takeaway, right? That's the big piece you need to think about as an instructional leader, as a school leader, how are you going to decide if the processes you put in place for implementation monitoring really work? And how are you going to know how to revise, how to change, how to improve things? And really remember, it's a team decision, right? So you want to think about your team, you want to think about your stakeholders, you want to think about bringing in a lot of people that are part of this to make the decision. And so that's a big component, but really reflect on that. And that's going to take time. And some people are more reflective than others, but really be thinking about how do we improve, how do we move forward. And so this all ties back to our VA CSIP model that we started with at the beginning of this presentation. We have that plan, do, study, act model, monitoring at this center. So when we go through a whole monitoring process, hopefully we have answered that. What changes can result in improvement? How do we know if we've seen an improvement? Do we understand what we're trying to accomplish? And how do we know if we really made things better? Things are not going well, things need to be adjusted. And so really it's that constant cycle of that continuous improvement. And we always want to be thinking about how can we make things better and how can we really capitalize on our successes. And monitoring is very important all along the way. And I know we're short on time today, but as you can see, the next slide talks about the 5 whys. And so we include this here because when we get to that revise, we get to that reflect stage, when we get to where a plan is working, we're seeing the monitor, we're seeing the implementation and impact data, we're looking at it, and then we want to assess where we are. And sometimes we're not where we want to be. And sometimes we thought we knew we were trying to figure out, we thought we knew what we were going to solve, we thought we knew what the problem was, but we were a little off, and that happens, and that's okay. And so you go back to this 5 whys template, and you define your problem, and you begin to ask, why is it happening? And why is that happening? And why is that happening? And this is a good process to do on a fairly routine basis with your CSIP team to really figure out and plan how to improve. And so keep that in mind. We're going to send this template to you and some of the documents sent after this training. And it's really a helpful, it doesn't take a long amount of time, but it's good. It's helpful for that guided reflection to really understand, are we on the right track? Are we doing some great things? We're not really solving the problem that we wanted to solve, and really to get out that root cause of what our issues are. So reflection question to consider when reflecting, reassessing, and revising. How do the selected interventions support the identified challenges or needs? How are the strategies, action steps, essential actions, and interventions in our plan showing measurable progress in student achievement? Always stay focused on that student achievement, student outcomes. What additional data sources are required? If the relationship between processes and outcomes is unclear, you always want to be thinking about triangulating data, bringing in multiple sources of data. What are our next steps for long-term and sustained continuous improvement? Remember that multi-year improvement plan, putting into place things that will go well beyond this school year for improved student outcomes. So just some questions to consider. On the next slide, you can see our implementation and monitoring resources as a result of attending this technical assistance session. Thank you for being here. You'll get an overview of the Module 4 slide deck. This will be sent to you, this presentation. And then we'll have Module 4 resources that will be sent as well, the at-a-glance, just a kind of a great summary of the key points, checklists, our evaluation rubric from the CSIP. You saw that, Rebecca presented that earlier, and that 5 whys template that we just shared. On our next slide, we also have if you have questions that you kind of step away from this presentation, like, wow, I really need more information on this. I really need to ask. And I'm a person that I attended training a lot of times, a few minutes after it's all over, I think, wow, I had this question. Well, you're in luck. We have our quality time every third Thursday of the month from 8:30 to 10. We're available for appointments, OSU staff, to answer your questions, to assist with anything. And it could be something minor. It could be something huge, but we're always there to help you and support, because our goal is the same as yours, to improve those student outcomes and to make your school a better place for teaching and learning. Okay. And then we continue on to the slides. And hopefully you can all still hear me as I struggle with some computer issues. I apologize for that. As you continue, we have the opportunity to share with you. You can see that we have the whole continuous improvement plan system of our modules 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, we provide training and assistance in all of that. And today we are concluding with module 4, the implementation and monitoring of the school improvement plan. Talked about the quality time. Upcoming events, our quick takes for 2021, 2022. Our quick takes, that is our newsletter. It just came out today. So if you got it this morning, then you are on the right track. And so if you're not getting that, we encourage you to sign up for that. We're going to have more technical assistance and training on those. And we're excited to announce too, we have a webinar on our evidence-based interventions on October 7th from 9 to 10. Training similar to this one, but really gets at those interventions, those evidence-based interventions. And a huge announcement, November 18th and 19th, a big event that all of you need to attend is that Principal Leaders Conference. November 18th and 19th is a virtual conference. We've sent out information to our Office of School Quality contacts in the divisions. There's information about it in the quick takes, another reason to sign up to get the quick takes. And so more information and training, and hopefully you can see that the Office of School Quality stands with you to support you and help you. We're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to coach and support and give you as much help as we can in every part of your instructional program. Also, we have a feedback survey. There's a tiny URL there, but there's also the QR code. If you go ahead and give us a feedback survey, because we're always monitoring our own progress and we're adjusting as we go along. And so any feedback that you can provide, we would appreciate that greatly. And we thank you for that, providing that information to us, and that feedback. So I'll leave that up there. You go ahead and do that. And we want to thank everyone for being with us today, joining us and your support of school improvement efforts and taking time out of your busy day. I know for many of you, your school year just started a couple days ago. And so it's great that you could take the time out to do this. And I know you have a great staff there that's carrying out everything in your school, and with all the challenges of the pandemic, we're just thankful that you're continuing to do what you do very well, which is to lead instruction in your division and your school. Hope we had a chance to get that. And if there's any questions, you go ahead and get them in the chat. We'd appreciate that. And I just want to thank everyone for being with us here today. Really appreciate all of your efforts for school improvement, and thank you so much. And if there's any questions, we'll get to them, but this concludes our overview of the monitoring process today. So thank you all so much for being with us, and have a great rest of your school year if we don't see you again.